Hi, if you're watching this tutorial, you are likely a student, which means that you are most likely between the ages of 18 and 24. You own a smartphone and it's not a BlackBerry, and you believe that it's important to continue learning new things throughout your life. Am I right? Does this describe you? Chances are good that it does, and not because that is what I think a college student is like. I know it is. How? Through the power of one of the world's largest databases that has been collecting information on the American population and what they think, feel, and do for decades, Simmons Market Research. Through Simmons, I have confidence that 2/3 of you are between the ages of 18 and 24. Full-time college students, up to 80% own a smartphone, and almost as many of you agree with the statement that it's important to continue learning new things throughout your life. Welcome to your first Simmons tutorial. In advertising, we're tasked with coming up with ideas that are meant to spark people's curiosity and engage them to form a relationship with our brands. At MediaVest, we used to call that innovation that works. Our creativity was meaningless if we couldn't prove that we were engaging the right people. By now, you've heard about a number of ways to use research to understand who your likely consumers are. Simmons is just one of those tools that provides you with a treasure trove of information to get you smarter about who you're going to talk to and how. While mining databases can seem overwhelming at first, it's actually quite simple once you learn a few basics. Today we are simply going to learn how to read a Simmons output, called a CrossTab. You've heard of 1,000 points of light? Well, a CrossTab is simply a way to organize 1,000 points of light, or data, into a digestible format. Today, I'm interested in learning more about young women's attitudes towards the internet. Before we get started, it's important to learn some of the key terms used in crosstab analysis. It's sort of like learning a new language. So let's take a look. The picture on the left-hand side of the screen is a small snapshot of a larger crosstab. The total heading in the column header here represents the total number of survey respondents, and the numbers in the bottom right-hand cell represent all respondents who agree with the statement, "I like websites that take special care to protect my privacy." So let's start by defining the terms, and we'll get into the actual meaning of these numbers on the next slide. So the first term you need to understand is sample. Here, the total sample size is simply the number of total respondents to the Simmons survey. In this survey, we have a total of 24,054 respondents. Simmons contacts 24,000 people in 2 waves over the course of each year. 12,000 in the first wave fill out the survey in the spring, and another 12,000 fill out a survey in the second wave, which is done in the fall. These people are carefully selected to be representative of the total U.S. population. In doing so, we are able to generalize from these 24,054 respondents to the total U.S. population, which is represented here as 226,276,000 people. One thing to note and be very careful of, the 3 zeros that you see here next to the weighted in the parentheses. That means the number to the right is represented in thousands, so you have to add 3 zeros to the end of the number. So the weighted population is not 226,276, it's actually 226 million. That is a very important point to remember. That is the total number of adults 18 plus in the United States. Moving along to the next 2 rows, they're noted as a vertical percentage and a horizontal percentage. The vertical percentage is the percent of respondents under the column heading that responded positively to the question. That means that 74.2% of all people agree with the statement, "I like websites that take special care to protect my privacy." The horizontal percentage represents the percent of respondents across the row heading. Since we are only looking at the total number of respondents here, this horizontal percentage is 100%. 100% of the people within this survey agreed with this statement. This will start to make a little bit more sense on the next slide. The last number we'll talk about here is the index number. An index number looks at a percentage in relation to the mean, with the mean being represented as 100. Any characteristic that is greater than the mean will be greater than 100. Any characteristic that is less than the mean will be less than 100. Let's take a look at the larger CrossTab to see how all of this plays out. As you can see, I've now added a column that only looks at women 18 to 34, the group that I said I was interested in learning about. The first thing we learn by looking at the total cell represented here is that there are a total of 32,766,000 women who are between the ages of 18 and 34 in the U.S. We know that because out of the total 24,054 respondents, 2,615 identified themselves as women between the ages of 18 to 34. We've generalized that to the total U.S. population as 32,766,000, 14.5% of all adults, as noted here. But I want to know what percent of all women 18 to 34 care about websites protecting their privacy. So I look to the cell that corresponds to my females 18 to 34, and I like websites that take special care to protect my privacy. If I care about what women 18 to 34 think, then I want to look at the number that represents the views of the 32 million women we have identified. That requires me to divide the column total, which means I'm interested in the vertical percentage. If 29,450,000 women agree with the privacy statement that represents almost 90% of all young women who are concerned about websites protecting their privacy. The beauty of crosstab analysis is that they do all the math for you. All you have to understand is what number you're looking for. Now, let's ask the question differently. Say I'm working at the agency representing Netflix, and I need to know who I should target to grow my user base. Netflix is known for binge watching, so I want to talk to people who consider themselves to be TV addicts. Who do those people tend to be? Well, looking down the total column, down here, 51,130,000 adults in the U.S. agree with the statement that they are TV addicts. I wonder how many of these 51 million people are actually young women. So I slide over to the column that represents women 18 to 34. And I see that only 7 million of the women 18 to 34 claim to be TV addicts. So the 7 million is divided by the 51 million to get me a total representation of about 15% of all people who claim to be TV addicts are women 18 to 34. That's a fairly small percentage of the whole, so they might not be my most likely prospects based solely on this analysis. The horizontal percentage answers the question, what percent of people within the row heading fall under the column heading? Finally, we're going to look at the index number. I'm trying to drive advocacy of Netflix, and I want to target people who are most likely to write a review. Since an index represents your proximity to the average, if a target population is considerably above the average, I can assume they are much more likely to engage in that behavior. In this example, 29.3% of all people who like to write reviews are women between the ages of 18 to 34. That seems like a decent number, but how do I know if that makes them more or less likely than average? Well, I can compare it to what percent of the total population do women 18 to 34 represent. We learned earlier that women 18 to 34 are 14.5% of the total population. If 29% of the people who are posting reviews are within that age group, that means they are twice as likely to post a review than the average person. So overall, if I target my young women, I can be confident that they are more likely to advocate for my brand than the average person. So that was a lot of information to cover. Let's try some analysis on our own. Go to worksheet number 1 on the website and answer the questions posted there. You may want to watch this tutorial again as you make your way through the worksheet. If you find it confusing at first, don't despair. It just takes a little practice to get comfortable with the concepts. But once you do, you'll have mastered a tool that will be a powerful tool of persuasion that will be invaluable in being able to sell your ideas through to your client. You no longer have to convince your client you understand their consumer. You can show them proof that you do.